Well, hello. I think it's noon, so let's go ahead and get started. Um, I am Pat Rogness, and I am the Vice President of Behavioral Health Services at Children and Families of Iowa. And I am super excited to be able to welcome all of you to this webinar in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We have with us again a very exciting guest, Dr. Sufna John. She has partnered with us in the past and is partnering with us again this year in providing us information on sustaining an act of kindness in working with individuals with trauma and domestic violence. So super excited to have her here. I am going to let her do her own introduction as part of her presentation, but just a couple things before I turn it over to her. Um, Make sure that at the end that you are filling out your evaluation, because we really, really love hearing what you have to say. And also if you want CEUs, we have to have that evaluation. Put your questions and comments in the chat. Dr. John is really good at maneuvering all of that, so she will take care of that piece also. And we will be ending right at 1 o'clock. So I know the invitation said 1:30, but we're ending at 1 o'clock. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. John, and thank you so much for being here and partnering with CFI.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, it's so nice to be here. I was reflecting before today, and I think this is either our third or fourth year working together. And so I'm appreciative for the invitation and the return invitations. And so what I'm going to do is share my screen so y'all can get a good look at the things we're going to be covering today. Okay. So just to make sure that, hold on, let me share it to make sure that I actually, there we go. Okay. So welcome. So today, because we're in a webinar format, you won't be able to talk out loud, and I actually am not able to see you as we're presenting. And so the best way for us to go back and forth within this presentation, which I hope we'll be able to do, is by using the chat. So if you would go ahead and do me a favor just to try that out and get the initial chat out of the way, go ahead and put into the chat your name, kind of where you're from and what your role is for today, just so we can get that chat going and I can make sure that's working really well for us as we proceed through the rest of the presentation. And so today we're going to be talking about sustaining a stance of kindness in our work, realizing that this work evokes all sorts of emotions in us, some that are kind and some that are not as kind. And so I'm Sufna John. I'm a licensed child psychologist who specializes in infant and early childhood mental health and intergenerational trauma. So what I do is focus my work on families in which there seems to be a pattern of trauma over time, where we see similar trauma histories in children as we do in the adults. That we are also seeing within our practice. And what we're hoping to do is kind of eliminate or change the trajectory of that. Okay, great to know. So chat is disabled, but I see that Q&A is working well, and so we'll go ahead and use Q&A instead as a way for us to communicate as opposed to chat. So some of the questions that I'm going to be asking you are reflective questions, which some you might want to answer just to yourselves, others you might want to answer actually in the chat so your colleagues can get the benefit of hearing your reflections. I train providers all across the country on elements of trauma-informed care and making sure that we are being really thoughtful about the way we approach our work, knowing that how we do our work is equally as important, if not more important, to what we are actually doing. But that's not the only part of who I am, and arguably not even the most important part. So I'm also a cisgendered woman, an Indian American mother to two biracial boys, ages 9 and 6. Typing out those ages in preparation for today was really wild for me, especially realizing that I almost have a 10-year-old. My eldest child is in his last year of single digits. I'm married to a philosophy professor, and I live in Central Arkansas, which is the capital city of Little Rock. I was born in New Jersey and was raised by my mom and dad, who both immigrated from India in their early 20s. And so I'm what's known as a first generation born United States citizen. And finally, I have a chronic medical condition that I can adequately treat due to good access to medical care and financial stability to be able to afford treatment. And those things are really important because it's not just my professional background that lets you know who I am. It's also my personal one. And I think it's rather unfortunate that a lot of times we give the message that you're supposed to kind of check who you are at the door when you do your work. One, I don't think that's possible. We are whole people inside and outside of work, and our work influences who we are at home, and our home influences who we are at work. And that's not a bad thing. So not only do I not think you can turn this off, I'm not sure why you would want to, because who I am is all of these things, and this work deserves the wholeness of who we are as we do it together. So, my hope for today is to provide a balance of knowledge building with also time for you to reflect and integrate with what you're hearing. And I'm really hopeful that we create an environment in which people feel inclined to share their thoughts and reactions and even their counterpoints. What that means is I might say something and you go, Dr. John, I kind of see it in a different way, or kind of, but I actually approach this differently. Those are really important things to share. There are so many right ways for us to do our work. And so I want you to feel comfortable sharing those things because I'm not the only person with knowledge or wisdom in this group. And sometimes it can be really helpful for you to hear from your colleagues. There are almost 100 people on the call today. And with that comes such a richness of perspective that I hope that we get into today. And so, to set the stage for learning, I want to make sure you understand a few things about me. The first is that we believe in benevolence on this call. What that means is I genuinely believe you are doing the best you can with what you know and what your environment allows you to do. And so I am going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think that's a overly naive way to approach life. Honestly, as I've done my work, I've noticed that this is really true, that most people are doing the best they can with what they know and what their environment allows them to do. And I believe that about you too. We're going to embrace a learning mindset here today. What that means is you might come across concepts you're not as familiar with or a different way of approaching things. And I'd rather you be curious and ask questions here than not have those questions answered as you go off and work with families, right? This is the place to learn because sometimes learning involves stumbles. Take a child learning to walk, for example. They will fall so many times while learning to walk. And we wouldn't say they're failing at walking. We would just say stumbling is a part of learning. And that's true for us as adults as well. But often our stumbles can include painful things that we say unintentionally. And again, I'd rather you say those things here and allow me and your colleagues the opportunity to correct some of those stumbles here, as opposed to stumbling for the first time in front of a family. Please know that there are ways for you to participate, like we talked about in chat or in Q&A. Interestingly, it's looking like there are people who are able to use chat. And so hopefully I'll have both chat and Q&A up as well in order for us to be able to participate with each other today. And then finally, I imagine you might have both mirror and window moments today. A mirror moment is someone says something and you're like, ugh, I could have said that exact thing. Like I see myself reflected in what you just said. And those are beautiful moments of validation, those mirror moments. I also hope you experience at least one window moment today. What a window moment is, oh, that's not a perspective I've had the opportunity to learn from my own life. Thank you for letting me see into that window. Thank you for giving me an appreciation for a perspective maybe my own life would not have given me. My own identities would not have allowed me to see about this world. And so I hope that you see both of these things in our work together. So let's start with our first reflective question. And I'm curious from you, how has your job changed the way you see the world? How has this work made you a kinder person? And perhaps what makes kindness difficult to sustain within our work? So remember, you can use the chat now. I'm curious from you. You can answer any or all of the questions above, but I'll wait as these responses come in about how has your job changed the way you see the world? And I'll get the ball rolling for us. Um, this job has made me more hopeful and more hopeless, which sounds like a contradiction sometimes. But I feel like this job has made me more hopeful because it has allowed me to see the way families can dramatically alter the generational cycles of their life and give to their children what they never had as children. And that makes me exceptionally hopeful. It makes me hopeful as a psychologist. It makes me hopeful as a mother. It makes me hopeful as a human being. It has also made me feel more hopeless at times when we are up against structural and systemic barriers. And I feel like I'm not doing a single thing to change the world, even though I'm trying my very best. And so for me, it's been both of those things. And as I'm looking in the chat, we have people talking about this idea of it's given me a deeper understanding of the story behind the behavior. I love this idea that behavior is a way that people communicate. And often there are things sitting behind behavior that unless we reflect and are intentional, we might miss. Yeah, like this idea that it changes the way I trust people. It changes the way maybe I even approach relationships, both in my professional life and my personal life. I'm seeing some of that dialectic, some of that holding multiple stances in your answers, that it's made me feel more challenged, but also feel like it's more of a gift and reward when I do this work. I'm so appreciative, by the way, of y'all sharing these kinds of things in the chat really openly. And my guess is that some of your colleagues might be having mirror moments with you right now, reading the things you are writing. I know certainly for myself, it has, in reading your responses, it makes me have some of those mirror moments. Yeah, so keep on going with this chat as we continue with our presentation today. I love seeing this stuff. Because this work does bring a lot of dialectics up for us. And if you're not yet familiar with that term, a dialectic basically says the idea that two things that seem like they're not possible to exist in the same space can be true at the same time. And my encouragement to you is start to become an and person instead of a but person. What that means is, for example, I am part of a system that hurts a lot of people. And I am trying so hard to do good in this world that I cannot do all the good that the world needs. And the world needs all the good that I can do. That children deserve to be safe and adults deserve real opportunities to become safer. That those things are both true at the same time. They don't disregard the first. And but sometimes gives this implication that the first part of what we said is no longer true because of the second part. And what I want us to get used to is living in the gray, living in those and moments, because that's real life. Real life is a story of and, not a story of but. And there is room for kindness and anger in our work. And I hope to explore this idea more with you today. Oh, I love seeing how busy the chat is, by the way. That is not distracting at all to me as a presenter. It really helps me know that you are connecting to what we're talking about. And I really appreciate your willingness to share what it's bringing up for you so far. Because this work does bring up intense feelings and it has such high stakes. This work is often personal to us as well. I don't know if it would surprise you to learn that people who are in the helping professions rather, things like doctors, lawyers, social workers, advocates, that we often have a higher rate of childhood trauma than the general population. Many of us are here because we want to be the adult we wish we had as a kid, or we want to honor the adults that we did have when we were kids. And either way, then, this work feels more than a job for most of us. It feels personal to some degree, whether people tie that to their spirituality and call it a calling, or whether people tie it to their mission and their values in other ways. Most people will tell you this work has an element of meaning to them beyond just a job, beyond just a paycheck. Because honestly, there are probably easier and less stressful jobs you could have picked that would give you more money, right? So this goes into that first part of today when I told you I really do believe you are here with good intentions. Because honestly, why would you have picked a job like this if you weren't? But this work is also, I should say, and this work is also relentless. And it naturally pushes us to feel very urgent, okay, because the stakes are so high and because it brings up so many feelings. And this work is often done by team members who have different training, they have different roles, and they have different personal and professional values from one another. And this can be a recipe for dysregulation. What dysregulation means is it's a state in which we are more impulsive and more judgmental and less in control of our thoughts and behaviors. Okay? And so I am curious from y'all, what judgments do you notice you jump to when you are dysregulated? So when your emotions get the best of you and you are not fully in control of your behaviors or your thoughts, what kinds of judgments do you notice pop up more when you're in that state of dysregulation? Because all human beings get dysregulated sometimes. And I would venture our work makes it happen more often than a lot of other jobs. Oh, yeah, this one comes into the chat. I don't trust. I assume I'm being lied to or manipulated. Ooh, that one was a big mirror moment for me. I often do feel more skeptical or more suspicious when I'm dysregulated. Yeah, people are talking a lot about, oh, Bridget brought up this idea of like intentionality. I feel like other people are doing things to hurt on purpose. They are intentionally hurting me. Why can't other people just do the right thing? Right? Stephanie's asking, like, yeah, in my brain, I'm like, hey, I lose faith in other people in these moments when I'm dysregulated. Beth, I had a mirror moment with you too. I do get more judgmental of other people. One of the ones I notice myself coming to a lot, and this, by the way, me saying this is not a humble brag. I don't like this about myself, but it is true that I go to this judgment more often where I go, they simply don't care, that other people don't care about this as much as I do, that I start to think that people are here for the wrong reasons. Maybe I get judgmental towards myself, Taylor. Yes. I start to wonder what it is that I did wrong or I'm not doing enough when I become dysregulated. Oh, these are such interesting responses. And I see some ties of similarity between y'all, but also some differences in the way that we think about and become judgmental when we become dysregulated. And what we do with our dysregulation is really important because we set the tone for the families that we serve. I'm going to play this video for you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. This sound is all the way up, by the way, on my end, so you might have to turn your individual sound up if you can't hear when this video starts playing.
There's something inside. Can you see what's inside the box? You can take the lid off. Is there something in there? There's a green cone. You want to put it back inside of the box? And put the lid back on the box? And close it up? Can I see that? Thank you. Let's see what else we have. Look at this. See? Look at this. There.
Hi, Teresa. I'm going to sit here and read a magazine.
Okay. That's Kelly. Kelly's going to sit and read a magazine. Kelly, look at this.
That's aggravating. That's so annoying.
Oh, I thought it was really interesting.
Well, that's just your opinion. It's aggravating.
Here. Can I see that? Thank you.
I'm going to go now, Teresa.
Kelly's going bye-bye. Kelly went bye-bye.
Okay, so talk to me about what you noticed happens in environments where people speak harshly to one another. Oh, yeah, Kristen, like the tone I set is so incredibly important, and recognizing that that tone may be the only respite some people have. Oh, yeah, that even babies can figure out this idea. Yeah, that what we saw is that when someone came into the room and critiqued or criticized, this baby stopped exploring. That even this kid who's so little was frozen. They were stuck. They weren't in a learning mode. They were shut down. Exactly, Elizabeth. And they weren't able to engage with the world because of a harsh tone. And what I will tell you is in this video, Kelly's not throwing things. Kelly's not screaming at the top of her lungs or using profanity. Kelly is simply talking in a harsher tone. And what I will tell people is if we were honest with ourselves, haven't we all been Kelly sometimes? Like, haven't we all had a time where we show up as not our most benevolent selves, not our most trauma-informed selves, that we show up and we kind of are Kelly? Maybe that we are harsher in that moment, or more dismissive, or make other people uncomfortable because of the intensity of our reactions. That all of us have been a Kelly sometimes. And I'm curious if you reflect back to a time where you were more harsh or rude or not your most loving, validating self, what was the story behind that context, right? What was the story behind how you showed up? And were people aware of that context when they were interacting with you? I'll give you a brief example of this. I was meeting a client for the first time, and right before I went to go get them from the waiting room, I had a colleague stop by and let me know that this idea I had for changing clinic policy to be what I thought would be more trauma informed had been like shot down by leadership. Like they weren't biting on this idea. And I was really disappointed and I was really frustrated, frankly. And I went to go get this client, and this client started saying dismissive things about trauma. And I was rude. I'll admit it, I was full blown rude, actually, that I was really frustrated by the way that they were speaking. And really, honestly, it wasn't so much about what they were saying. It was about where my brain was at. And I don't think I did behave kindly. And I don't think this person was aware of why I was responding the way I was responding, but that there's often a story behind how we show up to the work that we do. And I feel like sometimes we don't pause to reflect on how that might feel to others. Similarly, I want you to think of a time where a team member didn't show up as their most benevolent, trauma-informed self with you. right? A team member treated you in this way, treated you in a callous way or a disrespectful way. And I'm curious, do you know the story behind how they showed up? Were you aware of the context when they were interacting with you, and what was it like for you? Because a lot of times as human beings, we tend to extend a different amount of grace to other people than we do to ourselves. For some of us, we show ourselves more grace than we show others. For some of us, we show others more grace than we show ourselves. Right? But what I want us to think about is, how do I extend benevolence and kindness and grace to everyone in my work, including myself? Okay. And a really common strategy for how we do this, by the way, I love seeing all this stuff in the chat about people sharing these examples. One of the most predictable ways that we can hold a stance of benevolence and kindness is through regulation. Okay. What we know is that if we believe the best in others, genuinely, if we believe that, that tends to regulate us more. Frankly, it's not just a thing you do for other people. When you believe the best in people, you yourself are more intentional and regulated and can make more intentional choices. So the way I think about it is, believing in good intentions is something that helps me calm myself and center myself around my real values. And it makes me able to more authentically be regulated and be cohesive with other people. Yeah. And Angie, I appreciate this story you're saying in the chat about, like, stuff was happening outside of work that deeply impacted me in work. And I felt so defeated. And I'm sure that did change the way I approached my work, right? Like, let's be honest and validating of ourselves, that things that happen outside of work absolutely do impact the way we do work. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like a bad day at work to impact the way I feel at home too, and the way I engage as a wife and a mother and a friend and a community member too. And so let's talk about ways that we can regulate, because it's important that we recognize regulation in all spaces. The first being our own cues of dysregulation. How do we know we're getting to the point where we're getting dysregulated, and how do we manage that? Okay. And I encourage you, you need to invest in strategies that you can do publicly to regulate. For example, my favorite regulation strategy is reading a book that really helps immerse me in something different and distracts me and kind of calms me down. But if I'm in the middle of court testifying, I can't just pull out a book and start reading on the stand. That's not a strategy that I can use all the time. So what I need to do is invest in strategies that I can do publicly to regulate. So let me give you one of mine. One of my favorite strategies to regulate with is through temperature. And so what you will often notice if you were sitting right by my desk is I often have either a really cold beverage or a really hot beverage, sometimes both, honestly, in front of my desk, because I know in moments where I need to soothe, taking a sip of something really cold or really hot is actually something that helps my body to soothe. Other people might do things like deep breathing or progressive muscle relaxation in ways to help them publicly regulate. Okay. I also want you to think about, what are ways families show us they're starting to become dysregulated, and what are strategies that support regulation in families? And finally, what are ways we recognize our team is starting to get dysregulated, and what are whole team strategies for regulation? And so I'd love to pause here for a minute and ask y'all to share in the chat, what are ways you either personally or through your team regulate? What are ideas you have of ways to calm yourself down, to get back to being more intentional, that you could do as a team or as an individual, right? Let's use our shared wisdom on this call to give people ideas of strategies they might want to try. Yeah, so for some ways we can walk away, right? We can take a stretch break. This could be a whole team strategy where we go, let's take 5, right? Let's take a minute to walk around, to walk away, to come back more intentionally as a team. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about somatic experiences. What that means is body-based experiences. Isn't that interesting that there were two I take a walks right in a row, right? Because a lot of us invest in strategies that move our bodies as ways to calm down. There are also verbal ways to calm down. Jackie's talking about like actually sharing ideas and approaching things with curiosity can help to regulate. So when someone says something that I don't like, one of my favorite ways to diffuse that strategy is to ask, can you tell me a little bit more about how you came to that idea or your goal of sharing that idea? Because a lot of times I'm misunderstanding what someone is saying, or I'm making a judgment about it through my perspective. And if I hear more from their perspective, it helps me to be calmer. Right. Then we can do things like team engagement strategies like potlucks or celebrating victories together as a way for our whole team to coalesce around things, for a family to coalesce around things. And Madison's talking about like sometimes humor is a way to diffuse or regulate. Yeah, Lori, one of my favorite parts about working at home is my dog is here with me. And so sometimes it can be really helpful to regulate based on what's going on in the room. Okay, who we're with. I love y'all sharing these ideas, and I really encourage you to try them out. Sometimes human nature makes us scoffy against new ideas where we go like, oh, okay, that's never going to work. But I encourage you try them, because don't we expect the families we serve to try all sorts of new things, right? That's an expectation we have of families we serve. We expect them to try new things. We expect them to be regulated. So the least we can do is expect the same of ourselves and our colleagues, right? That we need to be accountable for our own emotions, just like we make the families we serve accountable for their emotions. So this is my call to you. If you don't have a go-to strategy yet, maybe that's something you can take away from this presentation, is starting to really understand yourself better and know when you're becoming dysregulated and invest in strategies to regulate again. I'm going to tell you something one of my favorite supervisors told me that has stuck with me through a job where all I do is victim services work. Okay, that's my full job. And he told me that you are not responsible for your first thought, and you are responsible for your second thought and your first action. That many times the knee-jerk thoughts that we have, we can't control. These are bias related. These are automatic thoughts that pop into our mind. And you can control where you go next, and you can definitely control the actions that you do. And so this is not my call to you in an unrealistic way. We're all going to have biases. We're all going to have moments where we are unkind. That's part of life. And it is our responsibility to think about what thoughts we're feeding, how we approach those thoughts that are unkind, and the behaviors that come out of us when we are in a state of unkindness. Okay, and so whether it's things like Angie's saying of carrying a soothing stone in your pocket that you can regulate on, that people wouldn't really know that you have, or it's things like I need to make sure that I have a support system at home that helps me to decompress from the life I have at work. Whatever it is, I encourage you to really think about expecting more from yourself and your colleagues, because really that is what we are expecting of families that we serve. But what I don't want to do is give you the idea that you've got to fake it. Okay. I don't know if you've heard of the term compassion fatigue before, but compassion fatigue is actually proven not to be true in the literature. What we know is genuine compassion actually recharges our battery. When we feel genuinely compassionate towards ourselves or others, it makes us less likely to be burned out. Instead, it's not genuine compassion that burns us out. It's the performance of compassion. It's this idea that we fake and perform feelings that we don't actually authentically feel. This happens so often in human behavior that we have a whole term for it called emotion labor. This idea that we fake and perform feelings we're not actually feeling. And so my goal of this presentation is not to help you fake kindness or fake compassion. My goal is to recharge your actual genuine kindness and compassion that I know brought you to this work. And so I am curious from us to share in the chat, what's something you wish your colleagues knew so they would have more genuine kindness or grace for you or for the role you play on a team? And I'll start us off as these are coming in the chat. I'm a therapist by training. And so my clinical work focuses on trauma therapy. And I wish my colleagues knew that there are some stories that I have heard that are burned into the soul of my body, that I can't forget them. And honestly, sometimes I wish I could, because I can't not hear their voices and I can't not see their experiences and I can't not be reminded of the awful and cruel things this world is capable of. And so I wish my colleagues knew that the burden of my job is sometimes too heavy for me to hold. And I wish they knew that in moments when I'm trauma triggered or moments when I'm not my best self, is I wish they knew what it felt like to hold the stories of hundreds of people, in addition to my own stories from my own life. And I'm curious from y'all, what's something you wish your colleagues knew so they had more kindness or grace for you? Yeah, Denise, that we had a mirror moment right there, huh? Oh, so many people are saying they have similar experiences to this as counselors. Oh gosh, Dr. Katie, I also had a mirror moment with you. Sometimes I feel like I'm just doing my best, like in a storm that I don't have capacity to totally get rid of, right? Like this is my best, like this is me trying. And I'm aware maybe, and maybe Dr. Katie, this is me taking your idea and running with it past where you would go, but your idea made me think, and sometimes my best isn't good enough, and I know that. Like sometimes I know that my best isn't what people need, and it's still my best. Like this is still the best I could do in this moment. Like I wish people realized like there's a human being behind this work. Yeah, absolutely. Please do communicate with me outside of this webinar. By the way, I'll just drop my email address into the chat and I'll do this at the end too. I always love hearing from you, by the way, about your feedback. I know you'll have an evaluation too, but please do communicate with me. Oh, Bridget, this idea of there's this whole other world that impacts me outside of my job. And I wish you realized I'm a whole person, right? We started this presentation with that idea of I'm a whole person. So what happens in my life impacts my job, right? I will tell you, whenever I meet a new family, I meet them as a psychologist. I also meet them as a mother, that I can't turn off being a mom. And honestly, I don't want to turn off being a mom, but part of me and how I approach this job is from being a mom. Yeah, like I'm just so appreciative of how honest and I think vulnerable a lot of people are being in the chat in like, what is this work and how does it take us away and bring us back to genuine kindness, that ebbs and flows through the context of what we do. And so my whole goal for you today is to replace those moments of performance kindness with genuine kindness. I want us to get back to those genuine, compassionate, and kind moments as often as we can. Because again, remember, I believe in your benevolence. I believe you are here with good intentions, or else why would you choose this job? This job is too hard to have picked it without a genuine stance of compassion. But sometimes our work and our lives pull us away from those genuine values we have. And so my goal is to keep centering you on what you actually are naturally bringing to this work, which sometimes can get lost. So let's talk about one of the first ways we can replace performance kindness with genuine kindness, and that is embodying empathy more of the time. So I'm a Brene Brown stan, by the way. I find that sometimes the way she describes concepts is so much more articulate than I could describe them. And so we're going to tap into a lot of her work around genuine kindness for the rest of this presentation. And she's a great resource for you as you continue to learn about this topic. So let's talk about what empathy actually looks like. We're going to watch this video and then we're going to talk for a little bit about it.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, so let's talk about this idea of one of the ways for genuine compassion is to avoid that urge in us to say the right thing to fix it, and instead connect to our own feelings and be present with someone in their own feelings. Yeah, like what do we think about this idea of empathy versus sympathy? And how has this played out in your work thus far? I'll tell you, like, I train a lot of therapists and I train a lot of mental health professionals. And I think mental health professionals have some of the worst distress tolerance I've seen of any professional. We really have trouble hearing other people's pain without trying to jump in and fix it. Many of us got into this work because we want to help people in pain. And what we don't realize is when we jump in to fix emotions in other people, we not only invalidate the complexity of their emotions, but also it's pretty condescending to assume that I know how to fix the really complicated problems in your life in a matter of minutes as you're talking, right? I know I told you in the beginning, I have a chronic medical condition. I have chronic migraines. And I'll tell you the amount of people who, after I tell them that, go, have you tried Excedrin migraine? Like, no, Janine, I've had chronic migraines for 10 years, but I've never thought to try Excedrin migraine. Like, I know in that moment people are trying to help and it doesn't feel helpful. It feels condescending. And a lot of times what empathy looks like is giving people the space to feel their emotions and to show them that their emotions can be held here, that we can hold all the emotions of our jobs. Yeah, Emma, this idea of sometimes I get stuck on trying to say the right thing. And what I will tell you is there is rarely a right thing that could fix what's going on for people. Okay, especially in complicated issues like family violence. There is rarely a right thing. And what most people need from us is to be seen and to be held. And that's true of your colleagues too. That a lot of times they don't need you to rush in and fix what's going on for them. You couldn't, even if you wanted to. They need you to see that it's hard and that this job is hard. And sometimes it gets in the way of us being our best selves. And I'm trying really hard to be my best self anyway. That most of the time, that's what people need. Okay. And I'm seeing a lot of moments in the chat. And I really appreciate how people are bringing up counterpoints. What that means is multiple perspectives on an issue. One of the counterpoints I saw in the chat that I think was such an important one is that I, as a parent, bring me as a parent to my job, and it influences the work I do. And you don't need to be a parent to do phenomenal work with families. That you can have, similarly, you can have a trauma history and that impacts the type of trauma therapy you do. And, or I shouldn't say the type of, but the way maybe you approach trauma therapy. And people without a trauma history can absolutely be phenomenal trauma therapists. And that's a good counterpoint in our discussion, right? To remember that we bring all our experiences, and a diversity of experiences can all make us really connected to our jobs. And so as we're thinking about empathy, an important part of the conversation about real compassion, genuine compassion and empathy is the idea of how do we incorporate boundaries. This is the thing that I don't think I was very good at for a really long time in my life. And so I'm hopeful that watching this video helps to click something, perhaps for some of you as you think about what carries you away from genuine compassion and what could bring you back to it. So let's watch this video and then we'll chat too.
One of the most shocking findings of my work was the idea that the most compassionate people I have interviewed over the last 13 years were also the absolutely most boundaried. Because
most boundaried.
So I'll give you a great definition of the definition of boundary that I use in the book. Boundary is simply what's okay and what's not okay. What I think we do is we don't set boundaries. We let people do things that are not okay or get away with behaviors that are not okay. Then we're just resentful and hateful. Me, I'd rather be loving and generous and very straightforward with what's okay and what's not okay. And I did not, that I learned from the research. I was the exact opposite. I assumed for the first 35 years of my life that people were sucking on purpose just to piss me off. Mm-hmm. That's what I assumed. Yeah, right. Whether it was someone who worked for me or it was someone family member who was constantly like, I was always critical and judgy. And I was like, why are they choosing these things? Why are they making their choices? They should know better. And then when this thing came up from my therapist, what if people are doing the best they can? I thought, my husband had the most beautiful answer to that question. He said, I'll never know whether people are doing the best they can or not. But when I assume people are, it makes my life better. So now I think I am not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm far more loving.
It's not just some like technique so that you can do that. That's really like a way of being to like nurture that soil of wholeheartedness.
Yeah. Generosity, to assume the best about people, is almost an inherently selfish act, because the life you change first is your own.
You love yourself.
Yeah. And so my question is big, B-I-G. Mm-hmm. What boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about you? But generosity can't exist without boundaries, and we are not comfortable setting boundaries.
So we are going to talk about this idea of boundaries And how do we set boundaries as individuals and as teams in order for us to maintain a genuine stance of compassion, not a faked one, but a real one. And boundaries are something that I think is really misunderstood by a lot of people. So I want to make sure we're clear. When I say boundaries, boundaries are focused on our own behavior as opposed to controlling the behavior of another person. So instead of you can't talk to me that way, which we can't control, it's here's what I will do if you talk to me in that way. So instead of you can't talk to the team that way, it's here's what the team will do if an individual acts this way. And I encourage you to reflect on what are norms that your teams and you can set up to prevent or address unkind moments, right? That how does our team manage when someone becomes unkind? And how do we establish those boundaries so we can all stay within a genuine, compassionate lens? Because I will tell you, if someone violates my boundaries over and over again, I'm not going to find a compassionate lens for them nearly as easily. Okay. And part of that is because I didn't set boundaries early on to reduce and change the way those interactions go. And so I encourage you to think about, this is maybe a second thing. So one, I encourage you to think about your own regulation. This is another one, is I encourage you to think about your own boundaries. Do you have boundaries in place that would allow you to have the kinds of interactions that maintain your ability to be genuinely compassionate to other people? Okay. So you're seeing some examples of boundaries in the chat. Angie, I hear that boundary setting is the work of a lifetime, honestly. I feel like a lot of us in the helping professions could use a lot of work, whether that's in formal therapy or outside of it, in setting boundaries and how this works. Okay. And while we're talking about getting to a place of genuine compassion, what I want us to do is avoid toxic positivity. This is this idea that we're only allowed to feel kind or compassion as part of our work. If I told you those were the only emotions that have merit and are acceptable, I would be forcing you to do emotion labor. I'd be forcing you to fake it, because there is a rightful place for anger within the work we do and within you. And so I'm hoping that in giving you a presentation about sustaining kindness, that I don't leave you with the idea that it is only kindness that should be a part of our work, because that's not being honest. That's not telling the truth of what our work brings up in us. So I'm going to end today with a story that I hope will help you to think about the next steps for you in holding both anger and joy and kindness within our work. So there's a Cherokee parable between an elder and a child. A fight is going on inside me, the elder told the young boy, a fight between two wolves. The dark one is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued, the light wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you, child, and inside of every other person on the face of this earth. And the child ponders this for a moment and then asks, which wolf will win? And the elder smiled and simply said, the one you feed. This is a story I heard a lot as a therapist, and I'm not sure if it's familiar to any of y'all. This idea of the wolf you feed is the wolf that wins within the context of our work, and we should be feeding the one that brings us closer to our values. And I didn't realize there was a whole second half of this story. This is not where the story ends. So let's keep reading together. The elder continued, if you feed them right, they both win. You see, if I only choose to feed the light wolf, the dark wolf will be hiding around every corner, waiting for me to become distracted or weak and jump to get the attention he craves. He will always be angry and will always fight the light wolf. But if I acknowledge him, he is happy and the light wolf is happy and we all win. For the dark wolf has many qualities: tenacity, courage, fearlessness, strong-willed, and great strategic thinking that I have need of at times. These are the very things the light wolf lacks. But the light wolf has compassion and caring and strength and the ability to recognize what is in the best interest of all. So you see, son, the light wolf needs the dark wolf at his side. To feed only one would starve the other, and they will become uncontrollable. How you choose to interact with the opposing forces within you will determine your life. Starve one or the other, or guide them both. And so what I want to do is encourage you with the idea that you need productive and helpful outlets for all the emotions this work brings up: the joy and compassion and kindness, as well as the anger. And I will tell you, I am never more my dark wolf than I am on the stand fighting for a family whose voice can't be heard. Those are dark wolf moments in my work, and I need them. That if I shut out that dark wolf, I would probably be shutting down the most fierce advocate voice of my life. And so what I want you to appreciate is the idea that anger serves a purpose too. That it's not just kindness that we need to experience as a part of our job. We need to have an outlet and use all the emotions that our job brings up in us. And so, kind of to simplify the last hour together, we see that kindness is a gift we give to ourselves and to others, and it is a key predictor of connection. And a lack of kindness can really lead to significant burnout. That we understand that one of the easiest and most straightforward ways to sustain kindness is to genuinely feel it more in the consistent way we do our work, and honoring our genuine emotions and setting up important boundaries, creating outlets for those multiple emotions, and returning to a stance of benevolence can help us sustain kindness over time. Okay. And so I encourage you, first of all, thank you for taking an hour of your day to learn. We all tend to have extremely busy schedules, so I recognize that you taking this hour meant you weren't able to do something else. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to build your knowledge. And what I want to challenge you with is, if you don't change your behaviors as a result of this knowledge, this won't help anyone. And so I want you to actually strategically think about, what are you going to do next? Whether it's, I want to learn more about X, Y, or Z that Dr. John mentioned, or I want to try to invest in strategies for my own compassion, my own boundaries, and my own regulation. Whatever it is, I don't want this to just sit in a shelf in your mind and never get used. I want you to have the opportunity to put this knowledge into practice. And so thank you for your attention and the good work you do on behalf of our most vulnerable children and families. I put my email address in the chat. I'm happy to hear from you about how this is going for you, what ideas you have. I know that some of you put questions into the chat. By all means, please feel free to email me those questions. I might have missed some as I was talking and they come through in the chat. So please feel free to email me as you're thinking about these things. I want you to notice in the chat that there is a link for the survey. Remember, completing the survey is necessary for you to get your CEUs, and I want you to get credit for the time you took and the learning that you did today. So make sure that you click on that link. But I just want to genuinely take the opportunity to extend my wholehearted gratitude to the work you do. It is a gift we give to our communities. And I'm a big fan of quotations, which might be clear from seeing some of these slides. But one of my favorite ideas is that really the journey of life is to find your purpose and your gift. And the purpose of life is to give it away. And so I'm really appreciative of people who choose to give away their gifts to the world to make it better. And so thank you for all the incredible work that you are doing. And also thank you for all these nice things you're putting in the chat. That's so sweet. I'm glad this was helpful for you. And please feel free to email me with any questions or comments you have based on what we talked about today. Pat, thank you again for welcoming me back to your crowd. People are always so engaged and so receptive to learning, and I'm happy to be here.
We are so grateful that you're here, Dr. John, and you just make us think and reflect, and it's just truly amazing, the knowledge that you bring to the table. So thank you so much for
You
being
are
here.
most welcome.
And I guess at that, we will sign off. And as Dr. John said, make sure you fill out the evals because we really appreciate your feedback. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Okay, thanks again, Pat.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. I really do. It's always so nice. They're always so like engaged and like really use the chat. It's lovely to see. And so it's always fun as a presenter to present to audiences that are so like actively engaged in the process.
Yeah. They
Um,
love what you have to say.
Oh, well, thank you. And I sent my slides. I am happy for those to be distributed to people who ask about them. I most prefer it in a handout form versus like in the PowerPoint. And so I'll email you like a PDF version of the slides. And I'm happy for those to go out to folks that are interested in receiving a copy of them.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, y'all take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.